Well, hello everybody and welcome to Jeff's Baking Blog. Today I'm going to be making some sultana bread. Now I saw a recipe for something called Guernsey gash, which is a sort of cakey type bread. Guernsey is one of the Channel Islands, which are UK territories just off the coast of France, and they have this this sultana cakey bread type thing, which using yeast. But having looked at that recipe, I thought it was likely to be a little denser than I wanted, so I thought I'd sort of use a different recipe, the one I basically use for milk bread, and add sultanas and chopped mixed peel to that. So for the ingredients, I have 300 millilitres of milk, which I've heated almost to boiling point, and into that I'm going to add 80 millilitres of cold water. So that's going to bring the temperature down a little bit because we want this to cool down. And I'll just check the temperature. And that's still a bit warm for what I need. So we'll leave that to cool down further. And I'll go on with the ingredients. I have 500 grams of strong white bread flour. I have 60 grams of softened butter. Then I have 5 grams of salt, 12 grams of dried active yeast, 20 grams of caster sugar, 50 grams of chopped mixed peel, and 300 grams of sultanas. I also have a little bit of oil that I'm going to use to keep the bread, the dough workable. So as soon as we have our temperature reduced a bit further, we're going to add our active dry yeast into the milk and water mixture. I'm also going to put in about a teaspoon of the sugar, because that will help to activate the yeast. Okay, so this is now at 43 degrees. You don't actually have to do this. You can actually, as long as the liquid, milk and water combined, is at least lukewarm, then you're okay. And you put the yeast in and you stir it around, and then we're going to leave that for 5 to 10 minutes for the yeast to begin to activate and go foamy. And then I'll come back and we'll get on with the recipe. Okay, so as you can see, our yeast in the liquid has activated. So what I'm going to do is put the sugar and the salt into the flour, and I'm just going to stir that around to get those mixed in a little bit. And then I'm just going to make a bit of a dip in the middle and pour our yeast mixture in. And I'm simply going to mix that together until it's all combined. And just to make sure I've got that combined reasonably well, I'm going to get my hand in there and just pull all the loose bits together. So that's good enough for the time being. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover that with cling film and leave it for 15 minutes. And then in 15 minutes we'll come back and we'll add the butter and the dried fruit and complete our dough. Okay, so we've left that for 15 minutes, and the next thing to do is to work the butter into that dough. I'm going to start off just by spreading that over it a little bit. And then we're going to work it vigorously for about a minute. Just to make sure we get that butter mixed in properly. And it will get sticky, but don't worry about that. Have to make sure we get that butter completely mixed in. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a little bit of oil onto the work surface and tip the dough out onto that. I'm going to work it a little bit more. And then I'm going to spread it out. I want to, where I can see little lumps, I want to pull it to make sure that the butter's managed to get into each part of it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the sultanas and the mixed peel onto the dough, and I'm going to mix that in as well at this stage. And any that come out you just poke back in, and they will come out, of course. And gradually, having worked it for a couple of minutes like that, you'll have the fruit reasonably well spread around. And then you form your dough into a ball like that. And we're going to grease our bowl, and we're going to leave the dough in the bowl covered again to rise. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in upside down and then turn it over. That's to get some oil on the top to stop a skim from forming. And having covered the dough like that with plastic wrap or with a damp towel, I'm going to leave it to prove for an hour. And then I will come back to you in an hour's time, and we'll go on to shaping the bread and putting it into a greased loaf tin ready for baking. Okay, well, I'm back with you, and I've let our dough rest and prove for an hour. So as you can see, it's at least doubled in size, and I've lightly greased my work surface, and I'm going to tip the dough out onto that like that. And what I'm going to do is simply cut it into two. You don't have to, you can just put the whole thing into a 2-pound loaf tin, or you can do what I'm doing, which is to form it into two balls of roughly equal sizes. Like that, and to put those into the loaf tin. One next to the other. I'm just going to press them down. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover these and let them prove again. So they've increased their size by about 50%. They'll come up above the top of the tin. And while that's happening, I'm going to preheat the oven to 180 degrees Celsius. That's 160 Celsius with a fan, or 350 Fahrenheit. And then we'll be ready to bake. So I'll come back and show you how they've risen, and then I'll put them into the oven. Right, well, it's been about 40 to 45 minutes since I put the dough into the loaf tin, and mine has now risen quite nicely, as you can see. And the last thing I'm going to do before I put it into the preheated oven is to take a knife and just put a slit all the way along the length of it. That will help it rise out a little bit. And then I'm going to put that in the oven, and I'm going to bake it for between 50 minutes and an hour. I'll check it after 50 minutes. If the bottom sounds hollow when I tap it, then it will be done. If not, I will leave it in for a little bit longer, and it should turn a nice golden brown. If it looks as though it's beginning to brown too much on the top, I will simply cover the top with silver foil or tin foil for the rest of the baking time. So I'll be back with you when I've taken it out of the oven and I've allowed it to cool down. Okay, well, I'm back with you, and I've taken our loaf out of the oven. I've let it cool down, and I've cut a couple of slices. I've tasted it, but I'll have another taste now. So as you can see, it baked quite nicely, and I've just buttered. This is half a slice, I've eaten the other half. So I'll just have a taste of this. Dropped a crumb. It does taste very good. It's got, you can taste the citrus from the peel, and lovely soft milk bread, and the sultanas. It just tastes very good indeed. It will be ideal toasted as well, I'm sure. So that's it for this recipe. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, please give me the thumbs up below the video, and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen, I will put an eye that you can click on, and that will take you to the recipe. And I'll also put a link to the recipe below this video, and I will be back with you with another recipe in the very near future. So until then, happy baking.